Hey BookTube, Science Fiction Reads here with a recent reads and recently acquired books. So what have I read recently? Well, Joan D. Vinge, Eyes of Amber. I recently picked this up at a used bookstore and randomly just started reading it and read the whole thing. The title story, Eyes of Amber, is actually a Hugo winner. It was all right. Two stories in this I particularly liked were Media Man, which Media Man's neat because it takes place in the same universe as her ex-husband Verna Vinge's books, like A Deepness in the Sky, A Fire Upon the Deep. Really the only tie-in is the way they refer to the passage of time in like kiloseconds and megaseconds, which is infuriating. But had I have known when I was reading those books, it would have been great to, actually, they don't use that time, they don't do that in A Fire Upon the Deep, but in A Deepness in the Sky, they have the different ways of using time. I also read another Joan D. Vinge, but there's actually a little graph that makes it a lot easier to decode what the hell they're talking about in terms of the passage of time. Anyway, Media Man was good. It was a short story, just a rescue mission, really, going from this asteroid where there's this group of humans kind of struggling to survive. They're not really struggling, but they're not prospering anymore. And they go down to this planet to save this guy. And the Media Man is just this kind of news reporter who goes along just to cover the story for the people back home. And a relationship forms between him and the pilot of this ship. And I really liked those characters. So at the end of the story, Joan D. Vinge at the end of each of these stories has like a little afterword. And she wrote how a lot of people, and I felt the same way, didn't like how the story ended in terms of the relationship between those two characters. And I agreed. And then she went on to say she's writing another story involving those characters. And I thought, well, that afterword was written in 75, so I got online and I tracked down, she did write that story, and then that story and Media Man were combined into, I think, a book called Legacy. Or maybe it was really just a short story. Anyways, I found a copy of that. I think it's called Legacy, but it actually has those two stories, plus this next book I read, The Outcast of Heaven's Belt. So I bought that, but at this point there will only be one short story in that book that I need to read. Anyway, another good story in this was The Crystal Ship, which I liked even more, wherein this woman wakes up on this starship in orbit. There's like 50 people living on this ship, and you get the feeling she's woken up many times. They're all abusing some sort of drug, so they're all in a daze. And sometimes they go down to the planet and they grab food and other supplies that are just left by the local race, which they never see, but they leave these offerings. And one of those things is the drug. And this woman, she goes down to the surface, she gets lost, she meets one of the locals, and pieces together what she's doing in orbit, how all of her people ended up drugged up and dazed and not caring about who they are, where they're from. And it was a really good story. I really liked it. So much so that I almost bought a hardcover collection of 3 novellas from the 70s by 3 different female authors. It's actually called The Crystal Ship. There's a Vonda McIntyre story in there and someone else. But I decided to save my money because I've got it. It's right here. So I really enjoyed that, so much so that I went online and bought her other short story collection, a couple of her other books, and then immediately read Outcast of Heaven's Belt, which also takes place in the same universe as Verna Vinge's A Deepness in the Sky, although there's really no connection other than the units of time they use. This was all right, 3 out of 5. I do look forward to reading that other short story, and I think that would be everything in her Outcast of Heaven's Belt, or Heaven's Belt series, I guess. She didn't write much in that, but I really enjoyed her short stories, so I'm looking forward to that other collection. Now, New World's November is currently taking place, and I wanted to read a certain story from in here, and I'll talk about that in my next video. But I don't like reading one thing from a book and putting it down, so I ended up reading the whole book, and I was actually not very impressed with everything in this except the story I wanted to read. Like there's the original Greg Bear novella Blood Music, which I didn't read because I've read the novel. That I would have enjoyed, I'm sure, and I will read that someday because I'm sure it's slightly different. But like there's a story by Asimov called Potential, and it was amateur. I could have written it. It was so obviously just put in there because it's Asimov, and it would probably help sell the book. There was really nothing in here that great, aside from what I wanted to read, which was a Robert Silverberg story, and I'll talk about that in a video that will probably be filmed and posted tomorrow. And also stuff I'm reading for New World's November out of here, so I'm not really going to talk about it. So far, my opinion of Murray Leinster is his older stuff from the 40s is, it's all right. And his later stuff is really good. But I guess I won't talk about it. I'll talk about it in the next video. And there's some other stuff I've read, but it's also for New World's November, so I will not talk about that here. So just a few recent pickups. This is something a little different. I don't know if I'll actually like it. Here's Saga Volume 1, which I found a while ago at a thrift store for like $2. But I actually got copies 2 to 9 in an online auction for $18, which is cheaper than like buying one of these new. So I don't know much about this story other than there's some sort of galactic war, and these two people in a relationship are from both sides of the war, and they have a baby, and I guess that's a big deal. I don't know if I'll like it. Certainly, whether I read it or not, I'll probably sell it on eBay and make a nice profit, but I'm hoping I like it. I have flipped through it. The artwork is awesome. Like, look at these covers. I think these started coming out in 2014, and I just looked up Volume 10 was released like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think. So, still ongoing. That was a pretty good deal. And just some random books here. A couple Joan Vinges, because I've realized I really like her writing. Last time I read her was years ago when I read The Snow Queen, which I really liked. And there's another one. Those are from the same series, I believe. And I've got the rest of those coming in the mail. Yeah, I really liked The Snow Queen. What else have I read by her? Oops. World's End, which is a Snow Queen sequel. Star Rebel by F.M. Busby, someone I still haven't read, but I'll get around to it. Another Larry Niven short story collection, Inconstant Moon. I keep buying these from a local bookseller because he keeps finding Nivens with like uncracked spines, really nice. I've probably read half the short stories in this. Yeah, about half. I also, from him, I just threw this into my order because it was $1. Just a short story collection by Moorcock. This I don't know about, but it was cheap. Timothy Zahn, Night Train to Rigel. Don't know anything about it. Just looked interesting. It's got like a bunch of anthropomorphic animals. There's like a badger or something on the back. Crazy looking. I got a book club edition of Waystation, a book I've already read and loved. I picked this up because I must have 5 other Simax in book club editions, and even though this is ridiculous cover art, I actually quite like it. And it's a good book, so I will add that to the collection. And last but not least, something I bought specifically for New World November, James Tiptree Jr., The Starry Rift. I believe I've read some of her short stories in different anthologies, but I couldn't tell you what. These off the top of my head, I don't know if they're 3 different stories. I can't remember if they're actually all take place in the same world before they were combined in this, because there's like a framing device to bind these all together. Something like these aliens go to a intergalactic library to learn about the race of humanity. So I'm interested in reading that. I got that because one of the prompts for New Worlds November is to read something involving a library. And some of these sound really good anyway, so I am looking forward to reading this. I think I might be able to read these for week 2. Either way, I'll be reading it soon. And that rounds out this video. So yeah, I'll have like a week 1 wrap up tomorrow probably, and a week 2 TBR for New Worlds November. As always, thanks for watching.